Here in England we have many woods and forests, but none so big that you could get lost easily. Walk in any direction for more than a couple of minutes and you'd find a road or a track. When I was 12, me and my buddy Lee were playing in the woods, maybe a mile or so from my home. We were familiar with the woodland around here. This particular day was overcast and the woods were murky to say the least. As we fooled around and walked, looking for undiscovered trees to climb, we saw a wardrobe in a small clearing. It was an old cupboard made of dark wood. It was rare to discover a patch of land that was unfamiliar to us in the woods, and quite strange to find a wardrobe this far in. Usually when people would dump their disused furniture, they would leave it at the wood's entrance. It must have taken quite the effort to bring the cupboard to this place. As a couple of curious kids, we thought we would go and take a look inside. Approaching with apprehension, we stared at the wardrobe in dismay as the left-hand door slowly opened by its own occurrence. Lee screamed and we retreated, panicking, even though we didn't really know why. When we calmed down, I shouted at Lee for panicking me, explaining that it was probably just the wind blowing to open the door. After a minute or two, we decided to approach it again, feeling silly about our previous running away. As we saw it this time, both doors were closed. We were maybe 20 meters or so from the wardrobe when again, the door began to slowly open of its own accord. Daring myself, I pressed on and approached, with Lee taking up the rear. I could see inside now. There were reeds and roots growing up through the base, as if it had been there for months and nature was taking over. I opened the right-hand door and gagged when I saw the dead squirrels. There must have been somewhere between 20 and 35 of them, most of them apparently ripped to pieces. We walked away fast, with the feeling of being watched, a feeling of unease that made our hair prickle on our heads. Lee and I didn't know what to make of it. The next day I went back without Lee, but with my brother. But the wardrobe had gone, and there was no sign that it had ever been there. No markings on the ground, and certainly no animal parts. To this day, I'm not too keen to return to this part of the woods. When I was younger, I had a room on the second floor of our first two-story house. I had recently lived in my room for 2 years before being moved to the next room to make space for the computer room. And up until then, I had no problems in the house. Upon moving to the new room, I noticed that the ceiling was heavily slanted. It was so slanted that on one end I could stand on my bed and jump and touch the ceiling easily, but on the other I could never have attempted to come close to touching the ceiling. On this end, the head of my bed was placed, and every night my face would be underneath the window in the ceiling. This window was the main cause of my problems for a long while. I could see strange things happening from outside of this window. I had expected to see owls or other nocturnal creatures lurking about, but instead I saw shadows being cast through the window and into my room. These shadows would plaster themselves onto my wall and begin to do different acts. This terrified me, and nobody believed me, and there was no way of covering the window with anything. I didn't know what to do at the time. The shadows were mostly human-shaped, and they would run, dance, and skip across my walls, and even run out of my door and into the hallway. One time, they took the form of humans with elephant heads, and began to dance ritualistically around me. I even heard drumming and chanting. This only happened 3 to 4 times as far as I can remember, but these experiences opened the door to other more terrifying things to come in the household. The dreams came soon after. Before moving into the room, I was a happy and friendly child. However, after moving into the room, the nightmares began to drag me, and I became silent and scared, and I would avoid any unnecessary contact with anyone. In these dreams, I would see people dying in vicious ways. These dreams were so real that when I woke up, I had a real hard time noticing that I was actually awake. I had never experienced violence of any kind up until that point, and had no reason to think of these things, not to mention dream about them. One particular night I dreamed about my mother's death, and I woke up knowing for a fact that that's exactly how she was going to die in real life. This upset me and I began to cry. She comforted me, but she assumed that I was just being silly and that I was dreaming. But I knew that she was going to die. It was the fact that I knew exactly how she was going to die, though. I was 14 years old when this happened, and I forced myself to forget the dream, but I still know that this is how she will die, and I can't explain how I know, but I just know. I also have dreams about my own death and my father's death, and I remember them very clearly. I'm so scared about this now.